Hello everyone and welcome back to another free course on public speaking skills, and today we're going to be looking at storytelling. This is a very introductory course to storytelling, and it's episode 1. We're going to do a series of episodes that will build on the things that we learn in this episode and in future ones, so that your storytelling skills can go from basic to brilliant. And one thing I want to really focus on today is the importance of engaging visually descriptive word choices. And I'm going to show you some really cool things that can happen when you substitute more abstract, general or technical words for words that carry a visually descriptive property to them. And the reason why visually descriptive words are particularly powerful is because they're closely aligned with the fundamental principles of communication. So communication derives from this idea of communion or community. Communication isn't me talking to you. It's when we're talking to each other. And it's not necessarily in a back and forth conversation. If I'm saying something to you, you, whether verbally or not, are saying something back. If you think of a comedian who tells jokes, when the audience laughs, they're saying something back. When an educator is teaching, when the students nod their head and they write notes and they ask questions, they're saying something back. And what they're saying back is an indicator that the educator is being successful. They're showing, the audience is showing signs that they're learning. And the educator can have confidence that their word choices are helping the students learn. So when a person tells a story, what kind of reactions will they get from the audience to suggest that the storyteller is speaking successfully? Well, the main indicator of a good storyteller would be to elicit imagination from the audience. And I don't mean that in a fluffy sense. I mean literally image generation. I'm saying words and you're seeing the story in your head. You can see what I'm describing. You can maybe even add to the picture yourself and fill in the gaps. And when the audience is engaging, they're focusing on that content and they're not focusing on something else like their phone or when's lunch. And so when we speak in a visually descriptive way, inherently we'll get good properties and reactions from our audience, like engagement, enjoyment, and people being able to see what we're talking about, even if we don't have visual props and things like that. And this is really powerful in a number of settings, particularly things like getting an idea across that lasts a long time. TED is a really good idea of this. So ideas worth spreading. The whole purpose of TED was that back in like a few decades ago, there were people who would be professors or researchers at like Oxford and Cambridge University who would be working on really interesting new studies and philosophies. And then they'd go to, say, a restaurant or a pub and they would talk about these things. And these conversations were so fascinating that people wanted to hear more. And so TED became all about technology, education, design, to make these new exciting ideas accessible to other people, hence ideas worth spreading. TED's recently changed their tagline from ideas worth spreading to ideas change everything. And the key point there is they want to not just have an idea go viral, but they want it to have an emotional effect on people. They want to elicit people to action and make the idea something that they can actually do, not just think about. And they also want it to be a conversation they can continue around the dinner table and with their colleagues and friends. And we've worked with a lot of TED talkers to turn their content into a story that leaves a lasting message. I'll give you some examples of that. So a few years ago, we worked with this gentleman who was a young medical student, and he had a lot of stories and examples to talk about how growing up as a university student studying medicine and doing his first emergency department work placements put an incredible strain on his resilience and his mental health. And he wants to recognize the community and the people that helped get him through those really difficult times. And when we asked him what success would look like to him in his TED talk, he said he wanted his message to spread. He wanted to reach lots of people. So we, even though it was a live speech, we crafted his story with the internet in mind. We made it so that it was engaging. It had a particularly potent beginning, so it would be engaging and get click-through and engagement and watch time on the internet. And we were successful in that in within 6 months of the video being uploaded. In fact, within 3 months of it being uploaded, he had over 300,000 views. And so that's the power of a good story, is that you don't just talk to your audience, you can sometimes reach the audience's audience. Stories tend to ripple through communities, and they stay with people. We had another person who wanted to tell a different story to a different audience. Michael Macalino is an interesting gentleman. He used to be an accountant, and he decided instead that he wanted to help people build and get investments in agricultural technologies. He was very passionate about ensuring that Australia and the world had enough food by 2050. It's a very difficult economic and farming problem to solve. And so we asked him, do you want to go viral? And he said, no, I want to get the attention of certain people. I want to, get the attention of big players like Silicon Valley and other investors who also want to invest in our food infrastructure and technology. And so we crafted his story slightly differently to get the attention of TED, the main website, not just TEDx, the independent website. And so his story resonated with those people in particular. And he was one of very, very few people to be featured on the main TED website. And in turn, he was invited to speak. And he has since grown his business and his influence because of that talk. And so that's an example of telling a story that just needs to resonate with few people, but it makes all the difference. Something similar happened recently with my wife at the same TED conference. She was actually not supposed to be a speaker. She was one of the backup speakers because we were hosting the event. But one of the speakers, unfortunately, couldn't make their talk, even though they worked a year. They worked for a year to get their TED talk. Their wife was having a child during the conference, so they couldn't do it. My wife stepped up to do a presentation with very little preparation, but she did it very well, and she did it with one story in mind. She wanted to tell her own personal story, and in such a way that it would resonate with others and prompt them to action. She just wanted to follow the principles of TED, of getting strong emotion, being able to create a conversation and being able to do something with the information. And what she did was, her talk was called Not All Those Who Wander Are Lost. And it got the attention of two people in particular in the audience. There was a mother and a daughter. Their relationship was somewhat estranged and strained, and they weren't talking much with each other. But because of the talk, they became excited to action, to reconnect, and to start wandering the country and the world to find more family that they had lost and that they wanted to reconnect with. About a few months later, they came back from their overseas holiday that they had done because of Sonia's speech. And they came back with two very interesting tattoos on their forearms. These, in big text across both the mother and the daughter's forearm, were the words, "Not all those who wander are lost." And it just goes to show that stories can literally leave an impression on people. But you don't need to excite people to get a tattoo to make a meaningful difference and impression in people's life. Stories, almost, when done correctly, they make your content very hot, and it tends to brand a memory in people that can last forever. And that's one of the greatest upsides of being a great storyteller, is creating such vivid imagination and possibilities in people that that memory basically has become so vivid and impactful that it stays with them forever. And that's why stories have a certain advantage to them than mere explanations don't have. It's the use of visually descriptive language to get the brain generating powerful images and associations that create this lasting memory effect in people. You could ask the question, if you were to try to engage your audience, what would they say back? So if you've got content or a story that you want to tell, if you spend a minute or 10 or an hour telling it, what's the thing you want them to say back? What's the image you want burnt into that brain, or the feeling? You can even ask yourself the question, how do we know that slow and steady wins the race? Well, a story about a turtle and a hare that we probably heard from our parents or someone else is how that idea has been strongly burnt and impressed in our mind. Another question you could ask yourself is, who's left an impression on you? Think of the best or the worst teachers you've ever had. And you don't have to think very long until one springs to mind. Usually the best teacher we've ever had is someone like charismatic, and they tend to be a storyteller. And it's those images and those stories that have burnt a place in our mind with an idea that we've carried with us forever. You can even think of the worst speaker that you've ever heard of, and they may have left a different impression in your mind. They may have sucked all the motivation out of something for you. So stories have the ability to leave something behind, and we have an opportunity to make it influential and powerful or boring and resentful. I want to show you a bit more of the science as to how this works. So one thing that we can rely on is this phenomenon in the human brain called aphantasia or hyperphantasia. I'm going to do an exercise for you. I want you to keep your eyes open, but I want your brain or your mind to be quite blank. Imagine your brain is a canvas and it's just a black screen. In the middle of the screen, I want you to picture an apple about the size of my fist. It's a red apple. It's a very healthy red apple. And coming out of this red apple is a short wooden stem. And coming out of that stem is a healthy green leaf. Once you imagine a leaf that's green, it's wide, it's got a seam down the middle, it sort of has a curve to it, and it comes down to a tip. And the weight is kind of heavy, it's sort of drooping due to gravity. Now I want you to transform the apple. I want you to keep it in the shape of an apple, but I want you to make this apple not a red fleshy apple, but instead it's like a diamond. So this apple is red, but it has sharp gem cuttings that shimmer and shine. And it's sort of transparent like a diamond, but it's so shiny that you sort of get a little bit blinded by looking at it. And I want you to take this red diamond in the shape of an apple with a wooden stem and a healthy green leaf and rotate it in your brain. And just watch it rotate. And stop. So this is a test that's often used to determine if people have what's called aphantasia, which is the inability to generate images in their brain. Someone who cannot see the apple has a brain that's wired in a certain way to be more abstract than literal. And so some people might only see text in their brain or nothing at all. And there's nothing wrong with aphantasia. It's like being left-handed. 1 in 12 people are left-handed. And often when I do this test in a room full of, say, 100 people, anywhere from 1 to 10 people will put their hands up in that room to say that they've got aphantasia. Now, a lot of people don't have aphantasia. The vast, vast majority of people have some amount of image generation in their brain. I am the head that's second from the left on this diagram. So I can see images that are visually described to me, but it feels like if I don't try really hard to see them, they fade really quickly. And so it's like I have to pedal a bike really fast to keep a light bulb on in my head. And so I can see them, but it's a struggle. There are a lot of people who have just very normal aphantasia where it's not much of a struggle at all for them to see an image. What's interesting then is the people who have hyperphantasia. If you're someone who, when you were watching that watching that apple in your head, you couldn't help yourself from introducing descriptions that I didn't say, you might have a overactive image generation or hyperphantasia. Again, it's not a bad thing. If anything, it's a good thing. The upside is that imagination and creativity and visual thinking comes very easily to you. If when I said it was a red healthy apple and out came a wooden stem, if you started to imagine things like a worm also coming out of the apple, or maybe multiple leaves coming out, or when I said it was a diamond and it was spinning around, if you imagine a camera crew taking photos of the apple, these are indications of hyperphantasia. You have a somewhat intrusive brain that can't help but add to and collaborate with the image that you have, rather than just simply complying with the instructions that are being followed. So the upside is that imagination and visual thinking will come easily to you. The downside is that it can be distracting, and sometimes you might be someone who might ramble, or your brain moves faster than your mouth. And one of the final stages of this is something called synesthesia, which is a really, really interesting phenomenon. And a lot of people have this, and a lot of people can even learn this. It's called sensory crossover, and it's very trippy. It's when, if I were to give a visual description, other senses start to participate, not just visual ones. So you might hear the crunch of the apple or the ding of the diamond and the resonance of it when you imagine it. You might also feel like the apple is cold, like it's just come out of the fridge, or that the leaf is fresh and you can smell it, or that the diamond has like a really cold, almost metallic touch in your hands, or it's got a hardness and a sharpness. You can almost feel it digging into your skin and almost cutting the skin. If you have this sensory crossover of you hear sounds and you feel colors and you can feel temperatures, or you can suggest distances, all of these senses are starting to blur together, then you might have synesthesia. Again, it on the downside, it can be very distracting. On the upside, it means that visual descriptions have a very potent effect on you, which means that you can really revel in storytelling or enjoying stories. What the takeaway is of this image is that everyone's brain is basically on this spectrum, somewhere from not being able to generate images to sort of, to very clearly, to like very, very much enjoying image generation. And it renders the question for us as communicators, why shouldn't we be using visually descriptive language if we want to really engage the vast majority of our audience? And so that's what we'll be practicing for the rest of this free session, is how to learn to tell stories that prefer visually descriptive words to abstract words. Abstract words being words that don't generate an image in our audience's head. Because when we pick visually descriptive words, it's not just us talking to the audience. The audience will be saying something back to us, but it will be imagination. It'll be quiet, but it'll be very loud inside their heads. And we can sense as a speaker that it's happening because you'll be able to see people's facial expressions changing, and you'll be able to see people deep and imaginative thought. And that's how you know that you're a successful storyteller. Just like a successful comedian can hear laughter, a successful storyteller will be able to detect imagination in the minds of their audience. We're going to play a game, and it's a really good public speaking technique that can be used in lots of different things, not just storytelling. But the technique, say what you see, is crucial. It's a crucial ingredient to the art of storytelling. It is the use of visually descriptive words instead of abstract words to create an image in the audience's mind. So if we were to just use abstract words instead of the say what you see technique, we would describe the house that's on this slide a little bit like this. This is a bad house. It's a wrecked house. I don't like this house. It should be knocked over. That's not a story. And although those are true statements and explanations about the house, they're not words that can generate an image in the audience's mind. They're too generic. Words like bad, should be knocked over, house without any further description, the audience can't see the image that we're looking at. They can't see it in their head if unless they were looking at it, the image itself. The words won't let people generate this image in their head. And so what I want to do here is progress you and your skills from say what you see level 1 to level 2 to level 3. And so this is what say what you see level 1 looks like. It is the challenge to take, say, an amount of time, like 30 seconds or a minute, to be able to say only what you can literally see. So I want this image of a house to be your script. And by doing this exercise, you will build a very strong mind-mouth connection, the ability to have your brain remember what the word is and your mouth to be able to say it. And when I put you under time pressure or in front of a crowd, the pressure that'll be on you to perform will make your mind-mouth connection more strained, and you'll find that you and ah more. And so if you want to improve your storytelling fitness, the say what you see technique is really good for this. And here's where we start, level 1. So if I were to set a timer for 30 seconds, this is me doing say what you see, level 1. I see a 3-story house. The windows are broken. In their place, instead of glass, are wooden plywood boards, blocking most of the windows. The outer facade of the house is a crumbling dark red brick with grey exposed parts, wood, rusted metal, cracks. The house is irregular in shape and looks like it might fall apart. The roof has holes and a mossy grey-green shingled tiled roof with a triangular prism as a pyramid as the spire at the top of one of the towers of the house. In front of the house is a grey chain link fence with a gold padlock sealing it shut. So that was me trying to take 30 seconds or more to describe as many things as I could see and explain them in visual detail, to the point that if you couldn't see the image, hopefully my words could help you see exactly this image in your head. What I would do to get better at the skill is record myself and give myself self-correcting feedback whenever I used a word that was abstract instead of descriptive. I would also self-correct myself if I ever heard myself hesitating or umming and ahhing. That would indicate that there's a strain between the word being summoned, from my eyes to my brain to my mouth. I had a little bit of strain in that particular example when it came to describing the triangular spire of the house. And so that shows that there's a bit of vocabulary that I could improve on there. Then we want to progress once we've done this. This skill is particularly good for people to start out with, but for some people, this will be the hardest level, even though that there are two harder levels, level 2 and level 3. People who find level 1 really hard might be people who don't have aphantasia in the first, who have aphantasia, who struggle to put images into words, but also people who are on the other end of the spectrum, like their synesthesia or hyperphantasia, because they might have so many ideas come to mind, their mouth just can't keep up, and they get kind of blocked and overwhelmed. So we see level 1 is fantastic at taking people on the extreme ends of the spectrum and just getting them to calm down and to regain control of their brain. People with aphantasia will really struggle with this, and people with hyperphantasia and synesthesia will struggle initially, and it will be easier once they've done a few practice sessions. People often in the middle find this really easy. Next activity is Say What You See level 2. So what we're doing here is we're going to do a combination of level 1 and level 2. You would set a timer for, say, 30 seconds, and you would just say what you can literally see about the old house, the bad house, the one that's falling apart. But then your next 30 seconds would be talking about the house that you can't see. It would be, for example, the bad house, but in its what it looked like before it became a wreck, or if it was remodeled and refurbished, what the new house would look like. It might also be saying things that you can't see, like this house and what it would look like to be on the inside of it, like looking at the rooms. You can't see the rooms of the house from the image, but Say What You See level 2 is to take a prompt image and to create an image in your head that you talk from about what it could look like. So in this slide, you'll see that the bad house is on the left, but in a gold frame. The right house is maybe the image that might appear in my head of what it could look like or what it did look like back in its day, like this fantasy castle. And so level 1 would be to describe what you see on a piece of paper like this. But level 2 would be to take a prompt image like this old house and to try and imagine something like a castle from looking at this image. So if I took, say, 20 seconds to talk about the old house, and then I took 20 seconds to talk about what it could look like, this would be me doing Say What You See level 2. So I'd say something like, I see a 3-story house with crumbling dark red bricks and broken windows. I see a chain link grey fence sealed by a gold padlock and a chain with green grass that's up to my knee in height, that's unkempt. But this house used to be a castle, not with crumbling red bricks, but with brilliant cream-coloured bricks that were undiscoloured from weather, and they were freshly painted. And the roof wasn't a crumbling, mossy tiles, but instead it was a glorious, glowing, shiny silver roof that's since been eroded. There were no cracks when it was a castle. Instead, it was a hustling, bustling manor filled with regular dance parties and important royal opportunities and events. No chain link fence. It was instead a grey brick fortress surrounding and protecting the house, but it has since crumbled. There you go. And so that would be what Say What You See level 1 and level 2 is. And the idea is that we can all see the image that I'm looking at right now, which is the old house, but only I, in my mind, can see what it could look like, the castle image that I described. And so by practicing this, I get the use of a prompt image to help me create a mind image, which then I try to put in the audience's mind with my visually descriptive words. And so that's an exercise that you can do. Some people find it really difficult to imagine an image and then talk off of that script in their head. Other people actually find that way easier than level 1. Usually, the higher up on that aphantasia spectrum you are, so the more phantasia and hyperphantasia you are, the easier this will be for you. And if you're lower on the spectrum like me, you find it quite hard. This is Say What You See level 3. You'll notice it's a blank screen. So the point of Say What You See level 3 is to be able to speak visually descriptively, but without a prompt image. You have to exclusively speak from your own memories and diagrams that you can conjure in your head and things like that. And in a way, all communication and storytelling is Say What You See level 3. If you're just up on stage with nothing but your own voice, with no slides, no props, nothing, you're a storyteller in Say What You See level 3 mode. You're purely using the script that lives in your head from your memories and things like that to plant an image in someone else's head. So a good exercise is to do the exercise we just did, Say What You See level 2, but now take the prompt image away. So you'd set a budget of time. It could be 20, 30 seconds or a minute to talk about the old house from memory, and then take an amount of time to talk about what it could look like, but from memory. I won't do that exercise because it's basically exactly what I said just before, but without the prompt image. And so now you have to do it based on not being able to see that image in your head. Now, what we've done is we've used a very involved image. The house that we looked at has lots of things to talk about. It's got windows, walls, a sky. It's got grass, a fence. And in terms of Say What You See level 2, it has lots of potential history or things it could look like, and we can talk about the inside of the house, the outside of the house, the past of the house, the future of the house. So it gives us lots of options. That makes it a particularly easy image to talk about if we want to have lots of things to talk about. It's a difficult image in terms of it might be overwhelming. There's so many options. How do we pick one? But it's an easy image in that there's no shortage of things to talk about. We can then make this exercise even harder for us in terms of Say What You See level 1, 2, and 3 by simply picking a different image. So this image of a pretty empty cinema, except for 2 popcorns and 2 drinks, is a way simpler image. And so now we need better vocabulary, better mind-mouth connection, better mental agility to be able to make a story from this description. So it's quite hard to do Say What You See level 1 from here. It's sort of easier to do Say What You See level 2. And then we can go to Say What You See level 3. We could pick something like this. It's like a children's birthday party. It's a birthday or a Halloween party. A wedding at a exotic location. A lone basketball player. A group fitness class. Someone doing their job. Here they're a florist or a botanist. A daily thing like getting a haircut. Feeling sick or being cuddly on the couch. Packing your bags. This could be a particularly interesting one for Say What You See level 2. Because at that point you could try to explain why this person's packing their bags, what caused them to pack their bags, where they're going, why. So you can be quite imaginative here. Something more thematic, like justice, or even something that could resemble an ad campaign. And so if you're someone in like marketing, or you're telling the story of your business, or you're trying to propose like a cinematic kind of idea, you could use a prompt image like this to basically create your own commercials. Imagine being in, say, the offices of Nike, and you have to propose the next clothing line and campaign and the theme of it. You would use Say What You See and you might use level 1, level 2, and level 3 to sell this idea. You might say something like, it's 5 a.m. The floor is wet from rain, and a small drizzle makes the air stiff and cold and unpleasant. Nevertheless, a woman zips up her pink and gray Nike running jacket and runs into the gray, slippery alleyway of her apartment neighborhood because she's putting fitness first. She's not hesitating from the cold and the difficulty and the obstacles and the challenge. She's decided, I'm just going to just do it. And so something like that is now starting to tell a bit of a story of marketing or a person's point of view. And so when we get really good at this sort of skill, you can see how it can become practical in different settings, like marketing or pitching an idea or a movie to someone. Now, that's the skill set, and I want to leave you with that as our episode 1, but I also want to plug what's on the horizon for us in terms of episode 2 and episode 3 of this course, like how we're going to take these basic storytelling skills and eventually become very masterful and professional at our storytelling. So I want to quickly spend the end of this course talking about what's next. And so I want to talk to you about 2 people, Joseph Campbell and Chris Vogler. And Joseph Campbell was someone in the early 1900s who was he took an interest in anthropology, the studies of human and culture. And he was interested in a question, which was, why do some stories last the test of time and others don't? Why is it that we're still interested in Shakespeare, Greek mythologies, Bible stories, things like that? Why do they seem to last forever and other stories seem to become irrelevant over time? And Joseph Campbell studied lots and lots of different epic stories, like the Iliad and Homer and the Odyssey and Beowulf and things like that. And he noticed some patterns, that they all had some essential elements, and their story structure had these components that were common to all of these different stories. And he proposed that there was this thing called the monomyth, which is that there's basically one storytelling structure that strongly resonates with people, and you can put different content on top of that scaffolding, that storytelling structure, and it'll have the properties of being hyper engaging and making messages last the test of time. He gave these lectures, and some very important people took the lessons from those lectures and credit Joseph Campbell for achieving like just legendary success with their stories. One of the students at Joseph Campbell's lectures was George Lucas, who had a very cluttered and disordered idea about a space opera with samurais and cowboys. And after listening to Joseph Campbell's lecture, he credits Joseph Campbell as being the catalyst for helping him create Star Wars from that messy contamination of genres. And Star Wars is arguably one of the most successful stories ever told to this date, especially from a commercial point of view and in terms of a loyal and deeply devoted fan base. More recently, there was another student who was in Joseph Campbell's lectures named Chris Vogler. Chris Vogler was the storytelling consultant for Disney during their Renaissance era. If you've ever heard of Pocahontas, The Little Mermaid, Lion King, Mulan, Hercules, etc., 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 in that Disney era, you can thank Chris Vogler for being involved for the storyboarding and the storyboarding narrative of those stories. Those particular Disney movies are the ones that sell the most books, the most costumes, the most video games. Those stories have, more than any other Disney story, lasted the test of time. Christopher Vogler's apprentice, who was an illustrator, also was involved in Frozen and Lilo and Stitch. And Frozen is arguably the latest Disney story that's also got that same potency of being able to last the test of time, whereas a lot of other Disney intellectual property since hasn't achieved that same level. Christopher Vogler directly quotes Joseph Campbell and refers to him and defers to him, and he currently now runs workshops exclusively trying to explain and educate people on different ways of using Joseph Campbell's methodologies in modern storytelling and movie making. And what I've done is Joseph Campbell's Story Circle and Christopher Vogler's Story Circle are very professional and difficult and unwieldy structures to use. The amount of time it would take to explain them and the audience that it would need to be explained to are very advanced and sophisticated. But what I've got on the board today is a more accessible scaffolding or introduction to their idea. And I like to call it the Story Circle. What we're trying to do here is create a trajectory for our story so that the reason for things happening always has a good purpose to it, and it's not just a story where it's like this happened and then this happened and then this happened. So the properties of the Joseph Campbell storytelling is that whatever we talk about next has like pressure on what we talked about before, and it bends the arc of the story into a shape like a circle. Our storytelling isn't linear or crazy. It has a certain like shape to it. And so as we work our way down this circle, we initially start with talking about a person, an ordinary person in their ordinary world. That's what you is. It's above the circle. It's an ordinary person in their ordinary world. If we talked about, say, the Lion King, Simba is a young, petulant lion cub who can't wait to be king. He lives in the Pride Lands, which is a peaceful animal kingdom. Suddenly, we talk about must. Must is that something happens to the ordinary person in the ordinary world so that they can't continue that same old way of life. So here in Must, Simba decides to go to an animal graveyard. He decides to go to a canyon where he's not allowed to go and there's wildebeests. And Mufasa, his father, has to save him and dies in the process. So now Simba can't remain a nice, peaceful child in the Lion Kings. He's now orphaned and has to run for his life. So must. Something is imposed on the person so that they have to make a move. It's a reactive arc to the story. When this happens, travel has to take place. So they have to go. And 3 is the first instance when the story crosses a threshold. We go from the ordinary world to now a new way of living or a new environment. And so it could be a physical, geographical change of scenery, or it could be a mental change of scenery. Like, say a story starts in prison, maybe we get invited into the underbelly of the prison. So there's like a secret society of people trying to dig a tunnel or something. In The Lion King, Simba travels from the Pride Lands to the desert and then eventually a tropical paradise. And so Go explains how that works. And he's chased by hyenas running for his life in that going process. Whenever we arrive in a new, unfamiliar, scary, special world, it's difficult. We have to make lots of difficult adjustments, and so we struggle. And so Simba has to make his way through a thorny bush. He's got to, walk for miles and miles without water in the desert, surrounded by vultures. He then collapses. He's then restored back to health in a rainforest, and he has to eat bugs and do uncomfortable things there. And then when we spend enough time struggling, eventually we hit a low point, and that's what lose is. And lose is a very special part of the story for 2 reasons. One, it's the first opportunity in which it is opposed to our first step, you. And one of the things that features of the story circle is that whenever we say things, we don't forget that we said them. We say things so that we can use them as storytelling resources later. And so lose is the first opportunity in our story to pick up an old storytelling resource that we established at you. So in the beginning, Simba was a petulant lion cub who couldn't wait to be king. So he was a child with aspirations of growing up. But in Lose, Simba becomes the worst version of himself. He becomes an adult lion and he refuses to return to the Pride Lands to claim his rightful place as king. So instead of being a child who wants to be an adult, he's an adult who decides to remain a child. And so that's important because this idea is only powerful because we established it first in you. We created potential energy in you and we've actualized it in Lose. The stakes are bigger in Lose because we're picking up what we put down in you. Whenever we spend a low point, we have to then go on the upswing. So from you must go, struggle and lose, the character was reactive. They were life and struggles were imposed on them, and they had to simply, react to those things. This is the first opportunity for the character to become proactive. And so what happens is Simba, try to get Nala from the Pride Lands, tries to convince him to go. He refuses. He then has a nightmare, and he sees who in the sky? His father, Mufasa. And so that's important that Simba sees his father in the sky when making this proactive choice, because it was his father who died in Must. And so again, we're picking up what we put down. Here, because his father died, he had to run. Here, his father returns, and Simba has a choice if he wants to continue running or if he wants to run back to the Pride Lands. And so he chooses to run back, not to run away. And what does he do? He returns to the Pride Lands not as a child, like he was running away from it and go, but as an adult. And here, he was a child running from hyenas. When he arrives at the Pride Lands as a strong alpha lion, the hyenas run from him. And so that's an important resource that we've used again in Arrive. Arrive is doing all the things necessary to restore the natural order, to go from the difficult and special world back to a new ordinary world. And so here, Simba assembles a group of people to help fight, the people taking occupation of the Pride Lands. He defeats Scar, and because of that, the Pride Lands can revert back to a new normal. And that's what we talk about in Ascend. Ascend sits opposite Struggle. It's an opportunity for the main character to sit and reflect on the things that they did wrong so that they know how to be a better person or what to take away from this message. So here, the Pride Lands goes from being a wasteland back into a greenland. The animals and peace returns. Simba has a child, and now he's no longer a child, but he has now become the Lion King. And so what can we take away from all the things we did wrong, like running away and avoiding responsibility, to now accepting responsibility and building a better world, is that we arrive at a final point, change, a new normal, a new you character in their ordinary world. And this is also where the sequel can begin. And so what's important about the change and the final moment of the story is that it sits opposite not one, but two communication resources. So in You, we established Simba as a child who wanted to be king. In Lose, we established him as the worst version of himself, an adult who remained a child. Now, Simba has decided that he's the adult who's being an adult. He also has a child, and so he's become Mufasa, the new Mufasa. And so all of these ideas are very powerful because they are stacked and they're working together to create a powerful story. There's some other things that are happening here, which I'll talk about on the next slide. It's not just the topics working together that create a powerful storytelling engine. It's two other things. It's the use of visually descriptive language, because this means that people can see powerful images at each step of the way, and it acts as a hooking mechanism. It takes 9 steps. It takes a lot of time, a lot of words. It could be 10 minutes. If it's a children's book, it could be 2 hours if it's a Hollywood movie. And we mustn't lose the audience at any step of the way. So in order to make sure we don't lose them, we need lots of engagement and hooking devices. And visually descriptive communication, where we get the audience to imagine constantly, is a hooking device. But it's not enough to have one hooking device. If making sure that people make their way all the way to the end of the story is the prerogative, is the primary goal, we should have at least 2 or more hooking devices as a fail-safe. And so we talked today about visually descriptive language. Another thing we'll talk about in episode 2 is the use of another hooking device called conflict communication. So we want to make sure that when we're visually describing things, we're visually describing unresolved, difficult and clashing ideas. So what that looks like is a conflict is an unresolved, 2 opposites in clash with each other. So when you have Simba being young and naive but wanting to be king, it's a conflict because he's not ready. When you have Mufasa asking Simba a question like, what does it mean to be king? And Simba says, well, it means getting to do whatever you want. he's answered a question incorrectly, so it's unresolved. And there's conflicts and fights, arguments, people getting things wrong, people being stubborn, people running away from things instead of resolving them. Because of these unanswered questions at every step of the way, if the visual descriptions don't keep you as an audience member, it's the what'll happen next that'll keep you. And so now, because we've got at least 2 hooks in the audience, if one of them falls off, the other one can stay so that the other one can be latched back on again. And this is a fail-safe way of ensuring that the audience sticks around for the end, which is when the good thing happens, the moral of the story, the big takeaway. And so that's what we'll talk about in the next episodes. In episode 2, we'll talk about what speaking using conflict looks like and how it can really hook and engage your audience. And we'll do some examples that start to use pieces of this circle. By the final episode, you will be able to tell stories like a professional. You'll be engaging, you'll be able to create powerful messages, you'll be able to tell short, medium, and long stories from memory without a script, even sometimes in an improvised session like a podcast. And so I look forward to seeing you in our future storytelling sessions.